Have you ever noticed how some days, after a long walk, you feel more worn out than refreshed? Maybe your knees ache a little more, or you're just not bouncing back like you used to. It's something a lot of us start to feel after 70, and it got me thinking, could something as simple as walking, something we've always been told is good for us, actually be speeding up the aging process? It's a question worth digging into, because at this stage of life, we want to feel our best, not like we're running on empty. Now, don't get me wrong, walking is wonderful. It gets us moving, keeps our hearts happy, and lets us enjoy the fresh air. But here's the thing. After 70, our bodies change in ways we don't always notice right away. Joints wear down, muscles recover more slowly, and what used to be a brisk, energizing stroll can sometimes leave us feeling drained instead. That's why I wanted to sit down with you today and talk about why walking too much might not be the fountain of youth we've been told it is, and more importantly, what we can do instead to stay strong, vibrant, and full of life. Over the next little while, we're going to explore this together. We'll look at how overdoing it on those long walks can quietly accelerate aging, and then I'll share some practical, easy ideas to keep you moving without wearing yourself out. Think of it as a friendly chat, me and you, figuring out how to make the most of every day. So, let's start with the first thing I learned when I started looking into this. Our bodies aren't quite the same machines they were decades ago, and that's okay. You see, as we hit our 70s and beyond, our joints, like our knees, hips, and ankles, start to lose some of that cushioning cartilage that keeps them gliding smoothly. It's just a natural part of getting older. Back in our 40s or 50s, a 2-hour walk might have felt like nothing, just a chance to clear our heads and stretch our legs. But now, that same walk can put extra strain on those joints, especially if we're pounding the pavement day after day. I talked to a friend of mine, Helen, who's 74, and she told me how she used to love her daily 3-mile trek around the neighborhood. She'd been doing it for years, proud as can be. But lately, she started noticing her knees creaking like an old wooden floor, and by the end of the week, she was too tired to even enjoy her garden. It hit her hard. She thought she was doing the right thing, but her body was telling her something different. That's the tricky part. We've all heard that exercise is the key to staying young, and it's true, up to a point. But when we push too hard, especially with something repetitive, like walking, it can backfire. Doctors call it overuse. When we stress the same parts of our body too much without giving them a chance to rest. For Helen, those long walks were wearing down her joints faster than they could repair themselves. And it's not just the joints. Our muscles lose some of their strength and elasticity over time, too. So, while we're out there trying to stay fit, we might actually be speeding up the clock on feeling stiff, sore, and older than we are. Now, I don't want you to think I'm saying you should hang up your walking shoes for good. Far from it. Movement is still one of the best gifts we can give ourselves, but it's about finding the sweet spot, enough to keep us healthy, but not so much that we're running ourselves ragged. Take my neighbor Tom, for example. He's 71, and he used to walk 5 miles every morning, rain or shine. He'd come back looking like he'd conquered the world, but over time, he started limping a little. His doctor told him he was overdoing it. His hips were taking a beating. So, Tom cut back to 1 or 2 miles, and he said he feels better than he has in years. Less pain, more pep in his step. It's a small change, but it made a big difference. So, what's the takeaway here? Walking too much after 70 can accelerate aging by putting extra wear and tear on our joints and muscles, parts of us that don't bounce back as fast as they used to. But here's the good news. We don't have to give up staying active. We just need to tweak how we do it. For some folks, That might mean shorter walks, like Tom's 1 mile loop instead of 5. For others, it could be mixing things up, so we're not always stressing the same spots. And that's where things get really interesting, because there are some simple, gentle ways to keep moving that might actually help us feel younger instead of older. Let's talk about one of those ideas now, something I wish I'd known about years ago. It's all about swapping out some of those long walks for something called low-impact movement. Ever heard of that? It's just a fancy way of saying activities that keep you active without hammering your joints. Take water walking, for instance. If you've got a pool nearby, or even a shallow lake in the summer, it's like walking on a cloud. The water supports your body, so there's hardly any pressure on your knees or hips, but you're still working those muscles and getting your heart pumping. My cousin Margaret, who's 76, started doing it last year after her doctor suggested it. She was skeptical at first, thought it sounded too easy to do any good, but after a few weeks, she was hooked. She says she feels lighter, stronger, and doesn't wake up stiff anymore. What I love about this is how doable it is. You don't need to be a swimmer. Just wade in up to your waist and stroll around for 20 or 30 minutes. No pool? No problem. Even gentle stretching at home can work wonders. I've been doing a little routine in my living room, just raising my arms, rolling my shoulders, and stretching my legs while I watch the news. It's not flashy, but it keeps me loose and limber without leaving me sore. The key is listening to your body. If it's telling you a long walk is too much, these gentler options can step in and save the day. Now that we've covered how walking too much can wear us down and started exploring some kinder ways to stay active, let's move on to another piece of this puzzle: how the time of day you move can make a difference too. You know, it's funny how we often think about what we do to stay active, but we don't always consider when we do it. Timing might not seem like a big deal, but after 70, it can play a surprising role in how our bodies respond to movement and whether we end up feeling energized or exhausted. I stumbled across this idea when I was chatting with my friend Linda, who's 73 and sharp as a tack. She used to take her walks right after breakfast, figuring it was a great way to kick off the day. But she noticed she'd feel wiped out by noon, like all her energy had been sapped away. She mentioned it to her doctor, and he asked a simple question: why not try moving later in the day instead? It turns out that little shift made all the difference for her. Here's why this matters. As we get older, our bodies have their own natural rhythms, like a clock that tells us when we're at our peak and when we need a break. For a lot of us over 70, mornings can be a bit sluggish. Maybe you felt it too. Those first few hours after waking up, when your joints are stiff and you're still shaking off sleep, pushing yourself into a long walk right then might sound noble, but it can tax your system before it's fully warmed up. Linda's doctor explained that our muscles and joints tend to loosen up as the day goes on, especially after we've had a chance to eat, stretch a little, and get the blood flowing. So, waiting until late morning or early afternoon could mean you're moving when your body's ready to handle it, not fighting against it. Linda gave it a shot, swapping her early walks for a gentle stroll around 11 a.m. She keeps it short, about 20 minutes, and says it's like night and day. She's not dragging herself through the afternoon anymore. Instead, she's got energy left for her knitting group and even a little gardening. It's not about being lazy. It's about working with your body instead of against it. I tried it myself recently, and I'll tell you, there's something nice about stepping outside when the sun's a bit higher and the air is warmed up. My knees don't complain as much, and I feel like I'm actually enjoying it instead of just powering through. But timing isn't just about avoiding the morning slump. It's also about giving your body a break when it needs it most. If you're someone who loves a good evening walk, maybe to wind down after supper, that's great. But here's a little heads up. Going too hard late in the day can sometimes throw off your sleep. I learned this the hard way. A couple of months ago, I decided to take a brisk hour-long walk after dinner. Thought it'd help me relax. Instead, I was wide awake until midnight, staring at the ceiling. Turns out, pushing yourself too much in the evening can rev up your system when it's trying to slow down. Now, if I move later, I keep it light, like a slow loop around the block, just enough to feel good without winding myself up. So, tweaking when you move can be a game changer, especially if walking too much has been leaving you worn out. But it's not the only trick up our sleeve. Another thing I've come to appreciate is how we can mix in some strength-building moves without ever stepping foot on a treadmill or sidewalk. You don't need a gym membership or fancy equipment, just a chair and a little space at home. I'm talking about something as simple as standing up and sitting back down a few times, maybe 10 or 12, while holding on to the table for balance. It sounds basic, but it works your legs and core, those big muscles that keep us steady and strong, without pounding your joints like a long walk can. I got this idea from my niece, who's a physical therapist. She told me that after 70, keeping our muscles strong is just as important as staying active, because it's the muscle loss that can really make us feel old. She showed me how to do these chair squats, and I'll admit, I felt a little silly at first, like I was playing a game of musical chairs with myself. But after a week or two, I noticed I wasn't huffing and puffing as much when I climbed the stairs. It's gentle, it's quick, and it fits right into my day, usually while I'm waiting for the kettle to boil. Pair that with a short walk later in the morning, and I'm moving in a way that feels good, not grueling. What's great about this is how it builds you up without breaking you down. Long walks can sometimes overtax us, especially if we're doing them day after day. But these little strength moves give your joints a rest while still keeping you in the game. You could even add in some arm lifts with a couple of soup cans. Nothing heavy, just enough to wake up those muscles. My friend George, who's 78, swears by it. He says it's helped him carry his groceries without feeling like he's run a marathon. Small stuff, big payoff. Now that we've talked about timing our movement and sneaking in some strength, let's shift gears a bit and look at how resting smarter can tie all this together. Because believe it or not, doing less can sometimes help us feel more alive. Resting smarter might sound like an odd thing to bring up when we're talking about staying active, but hear me out. It's one of the most powerful tools we've got after 70. I used to think resting meant I was slacking off, like I was giving up on keeping fit. But then I started noticing something. On days when I pushed myself with a long walk and didn't take a breather, I'd feel it for the next 2 or 3 days. Achy, tired, and just not myself. It was like my body was waving a little white flag, asking me to slow down. That's when I realized rest isn't just about sitting still. It's about giving ourselves a chance to bounce back stronger. Take my friend Clara, for example. She's 75 and loves being on the go. Always has. She used to walk for an hour every day. No exceptions, because she didn't want to lose her edge. But last year, she started feeling this deep fatigue that wouldn't shake off, and her hips were acting up more than usual. She didn't want to admit it, but she was overdoing it. So, she tried something new. She cut her walks down to 30 minutes and added in what she calls her rest days. Not lying in bed all day rest, but days where she'd skip the walk and just do some light stretching or potter around the house. She told me it felt strange at first, like she was cheating. But after a month, she was amazed. Her energy came back, her hips stopped grumbling, and she felt lighter on her feet when she did walk. That's the magic of it. Resting smarter doesn't mean giving up movement. It means balancing it out so your body can repair itself. After 70, our muscles and joints take longer to recover from wear and tear. Those long walks we used to shrug off, they can leave tiny stresses behind now. And if we don't give ourselves a break, those stresses pile up. It's like borrowing energy from tomorrow to get through today. Eventually, you run out. But when you weave in some rest, you're letting your body catch up. It's not lazy, it's strategic. Clara's proof of that. She's back to enjoying her walks, not dreading them, because she's not pushing past what her body can handle. And here's the best part. Resting smarter doesn't have to be boring. You can make it your own. Maybe it's sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, letting your legs stretch out while you watch the birds. Or maybe it's lying back with a good book and doing a few deep breaths. Nothing fancy, just slow inhales and exhales to loosen up your shoulders. I've started doing that myself, especially on days when I've done my chair squats or a short walk. I'll take 10 minutes to lie on the couch, prop my feet up, and just breathe. It's amazing how something so simple can make me feel refreshed instead of run down. Sometimes I even close my eyes and picture myself strolling through a garden, no sore knees, just pure ease. Now, tying this all together, shorter walks, timing them right, adding some strength moves, and resting smarter, it's like building a little recipe for feeling good. You don't need to overhaul your whole routine or swear off walking altogether. It's about tweaking things so you're working with your body, not against it. I think back to Helen, who I mentioned earlier, the one with the creaky knees from her 3-mile walks. She's found her groove now. She does a 20-minute walk in the late morning, mixes in some water walking when she can, and takes a day off here and there to stretch and relax. She told me the other day she feels 10 years younger, not because she's pushing harder, but because she's pushing smarter. And that's what I want for you too. Small changes can make a big difference in how you feel every day. Less stiffness, more spring in your step, and that wonderful sense of still being in charge of your life. If something I've shared today clicks for you, give it a try. Maybe start with a shorter walk tomorrow, or shift it to a time when you feel your best. See how it goes. And let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories or what's worked for you. If you've enjoyed this chat, give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. And hit that subscribe button so we can keep talking about ways to live our best lives, no matter the age. Here's to feeling strong, steady, and full of life. Because we've earned it, haven't we? Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.